Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be doing a reaction video on a very interesting video that I wanted to watch anyway between Shaykh Yasir Qadhi and Dr Main Al-Qudha, who is an Islamic finance expert, and it's going to be all about Islamic finance, a question and answer session.
Shaykhana, we will get directly to the point. Everybody is very interested in Islamic finance, but I'm going to ask a very technical question. My first question to you, Shaykhana.
I like it. He said it's a very technical question, but I'm sure it's not going to be, because it's going to be an icebreaker. Let's find out.
Can you please define what is, from our perspective, riba? And why is riba so problematic?
No, it was a technical question. Here we go.
When it comes to riba, we have different categories of riba. If you go to any classical fiqh book, you read about riba al-fadl and riba al-nasa and riba al-nasi'ah and riba al-ta'am and riba al-nuqud. To be honest with you, it's very confusing for the regular common reader, because the vast majority of those definitions and practical examples captured in those fiqh books do not exist nowadays. You read, for example,
100%.
Exchanging wheat for barley or date fruit for date fruit, right? Those examples are absolutely correct, but they are very, very irrelevant.
That's why we exist, right? Islamic Finance Guru, because we, when we started back in 2015, we were reading about this wheat and barley stuff, and we were trying to figure out, okay, how does this, how does this apply to what I'm doing in my, university or my workplace? And then we started writing, and that's kind of how the whole thing evolved. So let's see what Shaykh Main has to say.
Our society. And this is actually where the confusion is coming from for an average Muslim American who lives in this society, wants to conduct transactions according to the Sharia without being involved in riba. Let me just answer the question. The riba that we are referring to in the American society is the most severe level of riba.
He's not dodging the question. Here we go.
Something prohibited according to all madhahib all the time, which is riba diyun. It is the premium that has to be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. Very, very simple example. You go to Bank of America or to Chase, and you apply for $100,000 personal loan, or investment loan, or student loan, whatever. You know from day one that this is a loan, and you have to pay it back plus certain amount, right? It could be APR, it could be a lump sum, It could be flat fee. Whatever the formula they use might be. So we have a principal amount, and we have surplus or premium on top of the amount.
Completely agree with this.
Why it is problematic from a Sharia perspective? This is a very good question. You take a loan from the bank, for example, and the bank charges you, let's say, 3% or 5% interest. You take that money, you indulge it in a business, you make profit 10-15%, right? You pay the principal, you pay the interest, and you keep the rest for yourself. If everybody is happy, if it is a win-win situation, then why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is still prohibiting riba? It's a very good question.
Yeah, this is the question, isn't it? This is the question we also always get faced. Here we find out.
Sometimes you make, believe it or not, Shaykh Yasir, you make not 100% profit, you make 10,000% profit. It does happen in the real life, and I'm responsible for what I say, right? It's absolutely unfair to give the bank only 3 or 4 or 5% APR or interest, and you keep the rest of the profit for yourself. It did happen, especially like in March 2020, just a few days before the pandemic started, hitting the economy in the USA, that you were unable to make profit for sure, because the whole economy actually got frozen. You are unable even to maintain your principal, right? You lost the principal amount, the amount that you took, the loan that you took from the bank has been lost because of the economy. And by the law of the land, the bank still actually can go after you and ask for the principal amount and ask for the interest on top of it. So in both cases, there is a lot of injustice happen in the real life. Sometimes real exploitation when the bank is not taking any risk whatsoever. Okay, the bank actually is shifting and just putting the risk on your shoulder. Here is the loan, you do whatever you want. Okay, you make a profit, you break even, you incur loss. We do not care about you. Here is $100,000. You bring it back next year, 103,000. After 2 years, 106,000. This is absolutely unfair because the bank is not taking any liability or responsibility or risk, if you wish, with the other party. And this is why Islam actually is strictly standing against riba, because of the injustice actually implemented.
I think Shaykh Main is making a good point, and it is a correct point. But the problem that you have is, Dan from down the streets is going to be like, okay, well, it's not actually that unfair, is it? Like, because in the good times, the bank isn't taking all of your profit from you, so you're getting that upside. The bank is looking for a place to park their money and make a fixed return, and it's happy to forego that upside, knowing that it has a lot more security in the case of a downside scenario. And when the downside scenario happens, where Dan from down the street has already made a lot of money using this bank debt, and now, because he's taken perhaps too much risk, or because of the economy, whatever the reason might be, he's defaulted on the loan. At that point, the bank calls in the loan and it takes the property, it takes possession of the asset, and it makes sure that its downside is capped because it has that security. Now, I actually don't know if that is actually that unfair. I have my own views on why, I think that interest is forbidden, and that I find compelling as an argument for why interest would be forbidden. I personally don't find this line of analysis as compelling.
In the Islamic finance system, if you go to Islamic Chase Bank or Islamic Bank of America, for example, and you apply for a loan, they would say, well, we do not have money for you. We do not give you a loan here. You are in the wrong place. If you want to finance for your business, let's sit down and talk business, right? You want to build a house, there is something called murabaha or musharaka or ijara. You want to construct a building, there is something called istisna. You want some cash money to upgrade your business, there is something called mudaraba. So we sit down together and we discuss business, and we go with a model technically called risk sharing model versus the risk shifting model.
Dr. Main is doing what I often do in talks as well, which is giving the ideal scenario for Islamic finance, which is that risk sharing approach, which is where you are kind of, you have skin in the game, the bank has skin in the game, and we all go at it. And if we make a profit, great. If we make a loss, great. The problem is that the practice of Islamic finance is not like that.
Jayyid. And so, Shaykh, can we also then define riba, or at least the type that we are most interested in, is every loan that guarantees some type of benefit upon the lender is a type of riba. كل قرض جر منفعة فهو ربا.
Yeah, every loan brings a stipulated benefit to the lender, not to the borrower.
The lender, yeah.
Yeah, the lender will be counted as...
right, so the argument that Dr. Main is making is that, look, riba is haram because it's a form of exploitation. I completely agree with that, but I think the analysis needs a little bit more filling in. And of course, the context here is, Dr. Main is doing an introductory talk on Islamic finance, so he has to keep it simple. So the first move is already the one that he's made, which is, look, banks call in debt, that's really bad, that's exploitative, no risk, no skin in the game, poor lendee or poor borrower has got screwed over. Now, the response to that is what I said earlier, which is that, look, the borrower is benefiting a lot as well. So actually, the quid pro quo is that the creditor would potentially need to have those additional protections in order for him to be able to give you that financing at such a low rate. Okay, fine. So then, is interest still exploitative? Well, in my humble view, yes, it is. And I think the reason why interest is exploitative is for two core reasons. The first is, really like first principles thinking. There is a pot of money that exists in the world, and someone owns that pot of money. And there is a group of people who don't have that money, and they need that money to be able to function. And so the people who have that money rent out that money to the people who need it, and they are not actually doing something that is productive. They are literally just benefiting of the fact that they already have that money. They are not adding anything to society. They're not risking anything. They're not moving humankind forward in terms of progress. There's none of that happening. They are just being rent seekers on the thing that isn't really appropriate to seek rent on in the first place. The second reason why I believe interest is exploitative is because of the nature of money itself. 97% plus of our money supply today is created by banks. They just pop that money into existence and then they lend it out and then they make an interest return on it, and then that money goes back into the bank and it gets effectively destroyed. That's how money is created, how money is destroyed. Now the problem with that is that if you have the power to create money out of nothing, the people who most benefit from that are the people who have that power. And the people who least benefit from that are the people who don't have that power, i.e. the ones who need to lend that money. And so by its very nature, our monetary system today is creating a group of haves and a group of have-nots. And the ones who have, their money and their assets and their wealth is increasing at a really exponential rate compared to those who don't have that, because typically assets and money attract more assets and money. And the whole system, the way it has been structured at the moment, is making it so that there is additional juice and additional impetus added to that growth journey as well.
Examples of riba, and what do you think of the reality of the mortgage situation for us here in America?
Once we comprehend the definition of riba, the challenge that we are facing here actually is to implement that definition and to figure out whether a certain transaction does involve riba or not, right? This is the challenge that we are facing here. I'll give you an example. What is the difference between me offering you, Shaykh Yasir, $5,000 loan, right? And I ask you that you have to pay me the 5,500 within 1 year. That's a straightforward interest-bearing loan. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. What if I have decided to go to Bank of America and I opened a saving account, and based on the agreement, that $5,000 has to be paid back to me 5,500 within 1 year? What's the difference between this scenario and the other scenario? Technically speaking, there is no difference. No difference whatsoever. This actually means that opening a saving account is an interest-bearing loan, believe it or not. It's not introduced to you as an interest-bearing loan, but that is the nature of the agreement, right? You give your money to Bank
Correct.
of America. Your principal is guaranteed. Your return on the investment, which is the riba, is guaranteed by the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. That's actually the very confusing part, that the vast majority of those transactions that we are getting involved in are not introduced to us as riba, as the explicit riba that we know. They are introduced to you otherwise. And your job as a practicing Muslim is to investigate and to unlock the secret of the agreement and find out. Again, if someone is giving money, and that money, the principal amount, and its return, both are guaranteed, that is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. Whether it is called riba in the real life or it is called otherwise, we do not care. And this actually brings to our attention, Shaykh, the well-known fiqh maxim, القاعدة الفقهية, العبرة في العقود للمقاصد والمعاني لا للألفاظ والمباني.
There we go. So it's not about the way that interest is labeled that makes it interest or not. And our view on the car finance debate, PCPs, PCHs, HPs, is that often car finance is actually just a rental agreement that is souped up and dressed in the garb of interest, but actually it's a rental agreement because you look at the ownership of the car and it sits with the lender. The lender is renting it to you and you're paying that regular payment out. And in that situation, it's actually the exact opposite of what Shaykh Main is saying, which is that in that situation, interest is actually not interest. Whereas here it's saying sometimes things are labeled a charge or a rate or a fee, but actually that's interest. So it can go both ways.
Give another example from the real life. you have only $500 in your debit card, in your checking account, and you stopped by any point of sale and you made a transaction of $700. Usually it goes through. Okay, in the bank statement of next month, you will see that you have to pay back $200, and on top of that, there is $35 overdraft charge. It's not riba, no, it is overdraft charge. Now, your job is to interpret or to unlock the secret of what happened. When you do a transaction of $700, it means that you have taken $200 from the bank. Am I correct? Is it like a gift for you, مشان سواد عيونك, as we say in Arabic? No, it is not, right? So you have to pay back the $200. If this is the only thing you need to pay back, then we're good to go. I mean, what is the concern? You borrowed 200, you pay it back 200. Problem here is that you pay on top of it $35. I'm just giving random numbers.
That's the riba.
That number is introduced to you as overdraft charge. Well, you borrowed 200 and you paid it back, or you have to pay it back $235. You see? Well, that overdraft charge by default is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. Now, you can maybe prove otherwise. I mean, there might be some justification that there is some logistic work and paperwork has to be done, like to, get that 200. That is very possible. But the default rule is that you pay on top of the principal that you have borrowed. That is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. So example actually can go on. Maybe now you can see the pattern. Sheikh, let me give you the opposite example.
Cashback.
How about the cashback? Cashback.
From the Discover card or something.
Here you go. You have a credit card, right? And you use it for $100. You get $5 cashback. A lot of people actually say, is the cashback riba? Well, before you jump to a conclusion, you need to, again, unlock the secret of what happened. What does it mean for you to use your credit card for purchasing? It means that you are borrowing money from the credit company. Am I correct? So you borrow $100, okay, and you benefit from the $5, right? So you borrow 100 and you pay it back how much? 95. No, $95 because the cashback is $5. So 100 minus 5, that's 95. So you borrow 100 and you pay it back less. Now this is absolutely the opposite of riba. We just said كل قرض جر نفعا للمقرض فهو ربا. Every loan that brings a stipulated benefit to the lender. Well, who is benefiting here, the lender or the borrower?
The borrower.
The borrower. So the cashback actually is halal. And as I always say, that if you have any problem with the cashback, give it to me. I mean, I will be inshallah more than happy to.
Some people are happy at that.
Yeah, that's correct. So that's really interesting that Shaykh Main would take the fiqhi principle that the lender, if he is borrowing, then that is a problem on a loan. And he applies that in the case of the cashback that you might get from a credit card. And that argument makes complete sense. I think the other way to think about it is that Amex benefits from you transacting through Amex, right? They get that exchange fee, they get the payment fees every time, 0.5%, or however many percent they get. And so they want to encourage you to use as much of your transactions as you can through Amex in order for them to make that ongoing fee.
What does it mean to mortgage a house? Again, you have to unlock the secret of the transaction before you jump to a conclusion. When you mortgage a house, you get involved in 3 different transactions simultaneously. There is a sale agreement where you as a customer buy a house from the landlord, and there is a loan agreement because of course you do not have $500,000 to pay it cash for the house. So you apply for a loan from the mortgage company. That's a loan agreement, right? And there is a mortgage agreement where the mortgage company actually puts a lien on the property to secure their money. So 3 different transactions are going simultaneously. Sale actually is halal. Mortgage, according to the definition of the Quran, وَإِن كُنتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا كَاتِبًا فَرِهَانٌ مَقْبُوضَةٌ. Like it is absolutely the right of the lender to mortgage the property of the borrower to secure his money. So mortgage agreement is fine. Sale agreement is fine. Loan agreement is not fine. Because you borrow $500,000, You pay
Yeah.
it back 6 or 7 or even $800,000 within 30 years. Some people get confused. They see like the name of Bank of America on
This is the crazy thing, right? Because when I used to work in corporate law and see financing transactions, actually the financing transactions would have, let's say, 5 or 10 documents. Only 1 or 2 of them may be problematic, and only within those, only a few sentences would be problematic, because that's the thing that deals with the riba. Everything else around that entire transaction is there to support that economic activity. And so, those ancillary agreements, the debenture agreement, the mortgage, lien, charge, whatever it might be that you're using, board minutes, etc., that go towards this, senior facilities agreement that would, actually document the interest-bearing loan. Technically, none of that is, problematic from an Islamic perspective. It is that financing agreement and the certain sections within that financing agreement that are the problematic ones.
See like the name of Bank of America on the deed of trust, thinking that, oh, the bank is owning the house. No, wrong answer. The bank actually is the lien holder of the property, not the owner of the property. So the bank is not owning the property. Bank is just putting a lien on the property to secure his fund. So we ended up having 3 different transactions. 2 of them are halal, and 1 of them is haram. If you want to be like a very American democratic guy, you go with the majority, right? 2 against 1. So mortgage is halal. Here you go. Well, in the Islamic finance system, it goes the other way around, right? If it is proven that 1 deal is haram within that package, a combination of 3 different transactions, then the whole deal actually is ruined. The whole deal actually is not, is not halal. Based on that, the default rule of mortgaging a house in the United States, according to the traditional way, is not a halal option for Muslims.
As you are aware, Shaykhana, there are a number of academics and even scholars. They are not mainstream, but that's simply because mainstream doesn't accept them as being mainstream. But there are ulama and there are academics who are arguing that riba and the rulings of riba have to be rethought for fiat currency. And that is for multiple reasons. Of them is the inflationary nature of fiat currency. And there are other reasons they bring as well, that these academics would say, we all agree the classical Quranic riba is haram, we all agree, but this cash that we're using, this paper currency that we're using, given that it is different from gold and silver, and that it is actually de-linked from gold and silver, that's one argument. And then the other argument, which I think is very interesting, and that is that the value does not remain stagnant. And a long-term loan does not retain the same monetary value over the course of 20 years. So currency by its nature is inflationary. And so these group of academics, some of them outright say there is no riba and fiat, but others say that traditional fiqh has to be rethought. And we have to have a more nuanced response to the realities of modern finance. So without getting too technical, what is your overall position about this i'tirad, this objection?
Right.
It's a spicy question.
I mean, if we ask those scholars and academics,
unimpressed.
Yes, I mean, fiat money does not have any intrinsic value, and gold and silver do have. How can you buy gold and silver nowadays?
Bitcoin,
you have to use
Bitcoin.
you have to use
Just kidding.
fiat money, right? So fiat money actually is used to purchase gold and silver. It takes the same rules of gold and silver. So all the riba rules apply to gold and silver. They do apply to fiat currency nowadays. This is actually the minor issue. The major issue, Shaykh Yasir, it is really a fundamental one. What we believe in is that loan is not a mode of finance to start with.
Agree.
So
That
the
is a
inflation
minor
issue does not even exist according to our theory. Okay? If someone actually is approaching me asking for $5,000 to pay for the tuition fees or the rent of his apartment or to, whatever surgery or, I mean, something that's really, necessary, I'll be more than happy to give him $5,000 for maybe a few weeks, few months. And a part of that actually is that I'm willing to take the inflation or to incur the inflation, because giving a loan is an act of devotion and charity. I give it, for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm not allowed to take any single, penny on top of the principal. I give him or her $5,000, I get it back $5,000, no more and no less, right? Now, if that person actually is approaching me asking for $100,000, and I know for a fact that he wants to upgrade his business, right? Okay. Well, even if I have the $100,000, I will not give it to him. I mean, based on what, with all due respect, I give you $100,000 as a qardun hasan, interest-free loan. You take my money, right, as a loan, okay, because I do not charge interest, and you are practicing Muslim like me, you do not, pay interest. You take my money, you invest it in your business for 2-3 days, you make tens of thousands of dollars of profit, and then you come back to me after 3 years giving me a big hug, Jazakallahu khairan, here is your money back. Seriously? Is this a good business? Of course it is not. So if I want that you want my money to do business, well, let's sit down and talk business. We can go with the mudarabun, right? I give you the money because I know that you are the expert in the car dealership business. Here is the money. Here is the shurut and the conditions and the stipulations. Go ahead and work on my money on my behalf. Whatever profit you make, net profit, I will take. So my point here, Sheikh, is that
Sure.
inflation is an issue when it comes to giving the loan as a mode of finance. Well, if we disagree on this fundamental issue, that loan is not even a mode of finance to start with, then the inflation issue does not exist to start with.
No, I don't agree with that. I just completely disagree. Like he's missed the nature of money today and how money is created, and the quantitative easing that we've seen from the European and US central banks has been enormous. Like the money creation that we've seen and the financialization of the entire economy that we've seen over the last 3, 4, 5 decades has led to a financial sector that was like this, a little tiny thing in the 1950s or 60s, to something that is a huge thing. It's like far bigger than any other sector in the economy, even though it doesn't necessarily add any more value than it did back in the day. And the reason for that is because of the way that our financial system has changed. Like once we've decoupled from gold and silver, we have effectively put the creation of money into the hands of the central banks, and they, do as they see fit. And actually there is an incentive baked into our democratic systems where, you want to print more money because politicians and bankers and central bankers are short-termists by their nature. They want to be able to deal with the issues that they are facing in the next couple, 2, 3, 4 years. And invariably those issues are dealt most effectively by just, popping money into existence out of nothing. And then you use that money, and then after that, you let the next person, the next poor sod, pick up the mess after that. And then the next poor sod comes along and he's like, oh, hang on, instead of picking up the mess and really dealing with it, why don't I create more money and deal with that mess that way, and then also continue growing as a result of that. And that keeps on happening again and again and again until we happen to be in the situation that we are today, where it's just become completely unfeasible and completely unrealistic for us to continue going down that path. And we vividly see this in the example of Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, where what they've done is they've said that we're going to have austerity, we're going to do some cutbacks, but most of their cutbacks are happening, after 2025. Most of their cutbacks are coming in the next few years, not immediately. And the reason for that is because politically it's not great for them with the elections coming up in a few years' time to be able to be doing that cutting right now. Politically, it's better for them to be doing that cutting in a few years' time, possibly after the election, and let the next guy who comes along pick up the mess. Why would they do that? They wouldn't do that because the economy demands it. The economy technically would probably demand you to deal with that issue right now. They're only doing that because of the politics of the issue. And so going back to what Dr. Main is saying, I think that inflation can't be, I don't think this is a technical debate. I don't think this is a, like an academic debate on like what do you consider to be the purpose of a loan and, financing, etc. The point is that inflation is real, it's here, and in that wider context, money does have a time value, and we are getting poorer every single year if we do nothing with that money. These are real, tangible things, and that is caused by the nature of the money that exists today, which is unlike any other form of money that has existed in the past, give or take. Let's find out what he goes on to next.
What exactly makes Islamic finance Islamic?
Well, in the same way that we have like a Muslim family law and Muslim penal law and Muslim economic system, we do have an Islamic finance system. If you avoid like certain defects in the agreement, in which one of them, or the most important one actually, is riba, then this is by default an Islamic one. And by the way, I do not think it is fair enough to call it Islamic to start with. You can call it a Jewish finance, believe it or not. You can call it a Christian finance. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who prohibited us from dealing with interest, is the same one who prohibited the Jewish community from dealing with interest. وَأَخْذِهِمُ الرِّبَا وَقَدْ نُهُوا عَنْهُ. So riba actually is prohibited in Christianity for fact. Riba is prohibited in the Abrahamic faith for fact, in the Judaism for fact.
There we have it, folks. Jewish finance, Christian finance.
The most important thing is to make sure that you go with the just and fair and ethically responsible finance. Now back to the maybe Islamic mortgage companies.
Yeah, what makes it Islamic, or what makes it different?
Well, if you are looking for a genuine, sound, 100% Islamic finance practice in the USA, with those companies who deal in the secondary market, we are wasting our time, to be honest with you.
You won't find it.
I mean, you cannot find it, period, right? Unless you operate offline. Alhamdulillah, we do have a lot of attempts here in the US. Islamic mortgage companies who do not deal in the secondary market. For those who do not know what this means, secondary market, banks usually, mortgage companies, do not have the financial ability of waiting for you as a customer for 20, 30 years to pay them back the principal. They just turn around next day and they sell that contract to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. If it is worth, let's say, $1 million, they take $970,000 dollars cash, and that's it. And you start paying your money to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Again, they do not have the ability. In order for them to make those contracts, sellable to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, they have to go with the book. So they all actually are Freddie Mac compliant, way more than to be Sharia compliant. Now, to be honest and fair enough with those companies, they are not in the same level of diligence and dedication to implement an Islamic finance model. Problem here, Sheikh, is that the fundamental problem is that the whole system is a non-Islamic one. So in order for you to incorporate a genuine and sound Islamic finance practice within a non-Islamic finance, it is close to impossible, right? Because of the severe incompatibility between this two differences. In the Islamic one, you have to own the property. You have to be liable and responsible for the property. You pay maintenance, you pay tax, you pay insurance. You take the risk of like any increase or decrease in the market value. In the traditional finance system, you cannot do any of the above. So to do all the above or not to do all the above, I mean, it is impossible. However, we do have some serious attempts who were able to navigate through the system and find a way that is, I call it halal-enough option.
Halal-enough.
Halal-enough option.
It's a new fiqh category.
Yeah, halal-enough option versus just like traditional mortgage one. Well, I mean, if you have halal-enough versus absolutely haram, which one you go with? Like back home we say, al-ramad wal-al-ama, right? Like, something is better than nothing. So we do have, alhamdulillah, some attempts. Again, if you go to AMJA, just Google AMJA, Islamic Mortgage Company, you read like a very detailed declaration about those 5 major companies who operate in the US.
Isn't it a little bit overwhelming then? Like, what can we do against the global financial market then? I mean, is there any hope for us Muslims impacting the system? The whole world functions on riba. The whole world is based on a version of capitalism that from its very usul and fundamentals contradicts our ethos and our spirit. Yani for us, giving a loan is an act of worship. Right then and there, we change the entire paradigm of, the Western version of capitalism. For us, it's a business partnership. So what can we do to affect the system? I mean, we're a small minority in this country, and even in the globe, no doubt, Muslims are much larger, but still the system is totally antithetical to us.
Corrupt.
So can we as Muslims really produce a version or a product that is so solid, it will inshaAllah ta'ala supplant and replace the other system, or maybe even make a dent in it?
Well, are you talking about Muslim countries, authorities who do have the ability of restructuring the finance system? We're talking about Muslim minority in the US. Let's focus about,
Jayyid, okay.
focus on ourselves here. Well,
okay.
I have been in this field for 20 years,
All right.
Sheikh Yasir. I wholeheartedly believe that the Muslim community in the United States does have enough financial resources, intellectual, academic, human resources that are enough to establish our own finance system in the United States. Wallahi. Do you know that it is very, very possible to establish a federal credit union? Federal credit union. You need maybe $2 or $3 million to establish it, to register it, accordingly, and to start operating. In the same way that we have a lot of challenges, we have a lot of opportunities here. What we are lacking, unfortunately, I wish wallahi I'm wrong, but this is the reality. We are lacking a vision, lacking a leadership. We can establish our own system. And I'm aware of several different attempts. For example, Islamic mortgage companies who operate of the system. They do not deal with the Freddie Mac and Freddie Mae whatsoever. Very successful. Yes, their financial capacity is very limited, but at the end of the day, they produce. Why do not just copy and paste this model and do it over and over?
Financial
How about establishing a federal credit union, which is the alternative actually of the traditional banking system? I'm aware of several LLC, like different corporations who just bring money from different investors, and they work on the ground doing real estate business or car dealership or whatever halal business, and they're doing a wonderful job. We can challenge the system. We can, on the other hand, we can penetrate the system if we do the necessary.
I'm not sure. I think it's a nice idea in the climate that we are right now, where interest rates are so high. I think alternative forms of finance where you are sharing ownership and renting actually become, somewhat competitive with the mainstream. So I think that is a conducive environment for coming up with something compelling. And I think it's definitely good to be optimistic and, give it a go, think about coming up with an alternative system. How successful that is going to be, I think there's two things against it. The first, as a minority in the West in any case, the first is that you are a minority, so there's not very many of you, and not all of you are practicing, and you don't have the wealth of the majority. The second is that because the mainstream system allows for these slates of hand that increase your returns and leverage and allow you to juice things, unless those things are banned, necessarily those things are going to always perform better than whatever system it is that you come up with. Those systems, by the way, are also going to be most likely to collapse as well. But unfortunately, the lobby that is behind those kind of financial systems, the status quo, is far too entrenched for it to be able to shift very quickly, even after a collapse. Even after a collapse, the government and the central banks will be more than happy to maintain that status quo. It doesn't, it's too far beyond comprehension to be able to have such a fundamental change as to, get rid of interest, for example. So I'm slightly less optimistic, but I do agree it's definitely worth, a good old go.
The problem here, Sheikh, is with the will, with the vision, with the leadership. I tried myself, and it's not a secret, to establish a federal credit union, and subhanallah, I was like pushed back by several, not like common Muslim, no, by several scholars. Oh, be careful, Sheikh. This is money. You do not want to get involved in. Stay away from just educate people. Do not. I want to like bring Islamic finance from the theory to the practice, instead of like acting as the bad guy. This is haram and this is riba. I want to provide an alternative. When I started working on the ground, there was like a lot of pushback from within the Muslim community, leaders, mashayikh and ulama. That's actually the genesis of the problem that we have, Sheikh Yasir. Otherwise, wallahi, the opportunities are there. I'm responsible for what I say. We can do a lot. عرفت؟ نعم.
Alhamdulillah. So inshallah there is light at the end of the tunnel, and inshallah ta'ala maybe within our generation inshallah we'll be able to see a viable alternative where our youth, maybe even these people in the audience inshallah, when they grow up and it's time for them to not just get cash back but house back inshallah as well, that there will be viable alternatives inshallah ta'ala. That's good news, alhamdulillah.
So that's it for today, folks. That was hopefully interesting for you, and you found that stimulated some thoughts. Let's take up the Shaykh on what he said at the end, which is, let's actually practically come up with some alternative solutions. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.